Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's Home Furnishings Association webinar, which is Building High-Performance Sales Teams. This is part one. We're going to do a two-part series. I am Shannon Williams, the CEO at HFA, and I will be your host for today's webinar. If you are either a store owner or a sales manager or a team leader, we are very, very glad to have you here. We've got three incredible people that are ready to talk about probably one of the most important conversations in any business. Really, today we're going to be focusing completely on what is that foundation that needs to happen to build a high-performance sales culture, either through the right people and smart coaching and measured results and expectations. So our powerhouse panelists are bringing decades of experience in leadership and proven sales success. I'm hoping you guys all walk away with some tips, some ideas, something to question, but maybe some actionable work. And if anything, you have some great experts to lean into if you have more questions. As a reminder, this webinar is recorded and available on demand at myhfa.org/webinar. If you have any questions, this is interactive. So our entire question set for today was built by you as registrants, and any questions that you feed, we're going to try to feed everything back in and answer them. So just hit that at the bottom of the screen and we'll get to as many as time allows. And before we get started, we have to thank Synchrony, who is our education thought leadership sponsor. They make this possible for us to allow everybody in the industry to benefit from such amazing people and such amazing information to really help their businesses succeed. So thanks, Synchrony. Thank you so much for standing behind the association and the education that happens in this industry. So without further ado, let's introduce today's panel experts. I've got Brad Huisken. He is the founder of IAS Training. He is a nationally recognized speaker and author who's trained sales professionals and managers in all kinds of big ticket retail settings. He spent more than 30 years helping companies build world-class sales systems. Brad, welcome.
Thank
We also
you.
have Lisa King, who is the regional manager for Hudson's Furniture and Mattress. And she's bringing over 38 years of experience in the retail sales and team development and oversees multiple store locations and is known for her people-first approach to leadership and results. In the small time I've gotten to know you, Lisa, the Hudsons are very lucky to have you. And we have had the well-known Lori Kelly, who's the founder of Lori Kelly Advisors and has had numerous executive roles across the home furnishings industry. And today she leads a sales manager performance group and provides one-on-one coaching to industry professionals that are committed to excellence. And I know she is deeply passionate about this because for the 7 years I've known Lori, this is like the thing we click and connect on. Is we help the salespeople in this industry. So everyone, Brad, Lisa, Lori, welcome. Let's dive right in. Let's start with people. I think this is probably the perfect place to start. But high-performing sales team really starts with hiring the right people and setting them up for some success, right? Hire the right people and make sure they have the right skills. Brad, when you walk into a store and you observe a top-performing team, what are the signs and indications that the right people are in the right roles?
Well, you're exactly right. And I've always said that, the two biggest decisions you're going to make in your life are who you hire and who you marry, because you spend all day with one, you spend all night with the other one. And, we don't spend enough time making sure that our people are qualified and trained and the type of people that are going to be successful in sales. And there are certain personalities that lead to success in sales. But when I walk in a high performing store, the first thing I want to look for is the body language that the sales staff is putting off. Are they happy? Are they engaged? Are they smiling? Are they making eye contact? Are they busy doing something? Are they keeping their eyes forward, looking at the front door? Are they observing what's going on the sales floor? Do they know when a fellow salesperson needs their help or not? So there's a lot of things that I look for in that, rather than are they walking around saying, I hate my life, I hate this job, I hate this store, I hate everything about my very existence. And they're cancers that grow within organizations. And one bad apple can spoil the whole bunch.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why it's so important that we hold our people accountable to make sure that they are engaged and they're friendly and they're willing to serve and all those types of things. So
That's great. Lori or Lisa, do you have anything you'd like to add?
I would definitely love to. So similar to what he said, we actually call them IPAs, income producing activities. That's well known in my market. I literally have sometimes whenever I'm interviewing people, I'll have people, because we got people making six figures, but we also have people making 40,000 a year. And typically an interview will ask, well, what's the difference in those two people, right? And it's all about the IPAs. You've got one employee that will come in the building and she goes immediately to the phone or printing her reports to get started. Another employee comes into the same environment and she's in the back room finishing her breakfast sandwich before she gets on the board to start actually doing IPAs or being productive for the day.
I've never heard of the term IPA. That's cute.
Yeah,
It was
yeah,
good.
it's huge.
I
I mean,
want
not
to
that
add
kind
one
of
more
IPA.
thing too, Shannon. I think that, and I completely agree. I think, you know, people are wired to sell. You can either sell or you can't. And if you're not wired naturally to sell, it doesn't mean that you can't learn how to sell and be successful at it. But, you know, very successful salespeople, honestly, across the board, whether it's retail salespeople, manufacturer sales representatives, it doesn't matter. They're motivated by two things: money and competition. Okay. And money, not in a manipulative way, but that is like their scorecard. You know, how they're paid and how much they're paid and how much they can earn is like a win for them. And then, of course, being, you know, at the top of the list. So if you publish, you know, lists of leaderboards or whatever in the stores of who's the top sales or whatever for the week or the month or year to date or whatever, nobody wants to be at the bottom. The ones that are motivated, like Lisa, like you were saying, not the $40,000 ones, but the $1 million writers, man, you can just tell they have this real persona that people are drawn to, and it just is natural for them. They know how to sell. They know how to help customers with their problems, and they're just very, very motivated to do that. It's, you either kind of have that, honestly, or you don't.
Well, can I add a little bit to that as well?
Sure.
And I think that the number one thing that people want out of their jobs isn't money, contrary to popular belief. I think it's the ability to be and or feel successful.
Mhm.
And if I break it down to the simplest equation in a retail furniture environment, if they say, "Can I help you?" to a customer, and the customer says, "No, thanks, I'm just looking," and that happens to them 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 times a day, how long is it going to be before that person seems unmotivated?
Yeah.
And it's because we haven't taught them what to do when a customer says, "I'm just looking." And I think there are two things you need to teach them how to do. Is number one, give them a verbal map of the store. Say, "It's terrific. We always welcome lookers here at Hudson's. Let me tell you, you can find things in our store. Over here, we have our living room gallery. Over here's our bedroom gallery. Over here's dining room." Or start selling yourself and selling the store. And if I just ask the question, "Well, I'm curious who recommended our store," that's a powerful question. And it's one of two times in my entire selling process I say, you got to use that word and use it exactly. And that's the word recommended, because it implies you get lots and lots of recommendations. So the trust factor starts to go up a little bit immediately. And it's that kind of training and being specific with people that will help them to be successful, which in turn helps them to seem more motivated and thus enthusiastic and involved in their job and their position and doing the IPAs. And by the way, I'm stealing that term from you, Lisa. I like it.
I am too, and I think the glass bottle, I could put that on. I love that you called that out, Brad, because there was a point where I remember I was leading sales teams myself, and I remember being challenged in some kind of class or training where it said, actually, the number one motivator is intrinsic, and it questioned everything I had, because it was always, what's the carrot, kind of what's that external motivator? And I love that you're speaking that, you know, when Lori speaks of money and competition, I think that's completely right. But those are that's what makes those people feel successful, and successful
Exactly.
looks different to so many people. And so I think that that's such a valid call out, is learning what makes people feel successful.
Yeah. And one of my interview questions is, do you work for success or money? And I want people that work for success, because money is nothing more than a result of success. And especially in the furniture industry, if you're successful, you'll have money. But if you're unsuccessful, that's where things start to deteriorate rapidly.
That's a great call. So, Lisa, I have a question for you. When you're looking at people and when you're looking to hire a sales professional, how is it that what are you looking for in that process? I heard Brad give a great example, but what are you looking for? And then how do you actually onboard them, just so that you're making sure that the tone of what you're expecting out of them is set really early?
Yeah, absolutely. So I always say people buy from people first. So the first thing I look for is a big personality. It doesn't mean I won't hire someone that doesn't, because I've had some really talented salespeople who are very that doesn't have that high personality, but that is the first thing I look for. I've had salespeople that have a big personality but wasn't very good at sales and was very successful because of it, because again, people buy from people first. But I also like to look for things like if they did sports growing up, because that means they're competitive. And in this industry, I think you do need to be competitive, have a little bit of that competitive spirit in you. And then as far as the onboarding goes, we actually have a lot of employees who will say that this is the best training that they've ever got with Hudson's. We do a month-long training. 2 of those weeks is with an actual trainer, and then the other 2 weeks is shadowing, job preview in the store, doing some classroom videos, shadowing, like I said, some salespeople, as well as spending time with their mentor and or managers in the store. We usually try to start them in the store about 3 days prior to the actual trainer, so that they get that warm and fuzzy of the store and the team, because a lot of times they are training elsewhere with a different store. And then it seems to help them feel a little bit more comfortable their first day in the training class itself. And we do surveys afterwards to see how they felt the training was, and we've had a very good success rate with that. And then we also do a 3-month written bonus opportunity, since we pay our commissions on delivered business, to try to help them financially get up and going quicker. And because of our training, we have the majority of people hit those written bonuses all 3 months and excel at them, actually. So it shows us that our training is working, hopefully.
That's awesome. I love to hear that. Lori, I actually want to ask Lori and Brad this follow-up. I think that was one of the most interesting things to me. I started in the furniture industry, and when I came back in and I started to learn about retailers, is how different the initial training was compared to the experience I have. What do you see? Do you see most retailers in our industry executing initial training and onboarding training about the same amount of length of time, kind of same focus? It's more on sales strategy. Is it more on specs, more on product? How much of that supervised selling or, on the floor shadowing? And what have you found or seen that's the most successful mix of that dynamic?
Yeah, I wish I could say that because I've been in, I don't even know, hundreds and hundreds, including Hudson's, which is a fabulous retailer. Retailers, in our industry over all my years in this business. And now, Shannon, as you mentioned, with the performance groups, I wish I could tell you that everyone put as much emphasis and importance on the onboarding process as Lisa was mentioning that Hudson's does, because the chances of the people that you're adding to your sales team being ultimately successful and staying there for a long time is so much greater. If some of the smaller retailers, in my experience, don't necessarily put as much emphasis on that as is possible. I've seen it happen so many times where, the first thing you go to is product knowledge, understanding the vendors, how do you enter an order in the system, or how do you write an order and turn it in, or what the process is for that. And one of the things that they really don't do enough of, in my experience of watching this, is selling skills, to understand how to be successful selling. Again, I've seen it happen too many times. You're naturally wired that way if that's what you do. It doesn't mean people that aren't wired that way can't be successful at it. It just doesn't come naturally. So that means you have a bunch of people who need help in each of those skills, whether, there's a lot of different, leadership and sales processes that you can follow. I believe that there's basically 5 steps that there is from the beginning that you meet a customer till you follow up with them at the end. And if you can kind of give that to the salesperson and help them understand a nice flow that's not too complicated, not too laborious, but just an easy, common sense type of approach of the steps in the selling process, they have a better shot of being successful. But that onboarding process, man, it is so incredibly important. And unfortunately, I think there are a number of retailers that I've, worked with in the past that maybe don't put as much emphasis on that as they need to make sure their team is set up for success.
Yeah, let me just add to that, Shannon, and that when I'm interviewing somebody in my first initial interview, and I don't ever hire somebody on a first interview, because I think that's a big mistake. Okay. I think you need to take them through at least 2 or 3 interviews. But the 3 things I look for in the initial interview is, number 1, do they maintain eye contact? And if they're not maintaining eye contact, they're not going to be successful in sales, because they're looking all around, they're looking down at the floor, something's going on in there. Okay. The second thing I look for is, can they carry on a conversation? And if they can't carry on a conversation, then they're not going to be successful in sales, because sales is nothing more than having a conversation and developing relationships and friendships with the people that walk through your door, to where they're not customers anymore. They're friends of yours that wouldn't think of going to another furniture store except for yours, and especially to you. And the third thing I look for is, do they have the ability to listen?
Mhm.
And what I mean by that is, not only do they listen, but do they hear? And if I say to them, for example, what kinds of things do you enjoy doing in your personal time? And they say, oh, not much. Well, that's not much of a conversationalist. If they say, well, I'm very involved in my grandchildren's lives, and I do this and I do that, and that, they're carrying on a conversation. And I guess the other thing I look for is, um, are they trying to take over the interview and interview you, or are they letting you interview them? And that's a big mistake retailers make, is too often they're getting interviewed and the applicant isn't getting interviewed.
Yeah, and I would say to the end of that, I do also look for salespeople that ask questions. So maybe not taking over the interview, but asking those questions, because that qualification stage with with a customer, great salespeople ask the customer what brings them in, listens to what they say, ask the appropriate questions to gain that information, then they can turn it around into a presentation. But you
Yeah.
have to be able to ask, and you have to intuitively want to ask questions and find out more information. So I do like a little of that in the interview, because that shows that they're interested in learning more. But listening is critically important in the whole process.
Yeah. And the example I use, if a customer walks in, you say, what brings you in the store today? And they say, well, I just bought a new home and we moved the existing furniture that we have, but we have a new space that's a family room. I'm looking for furniture for my family room. Oh, where'd you move from? Well, tell me about your new house.
Mhm.
Because I don't care about the minute details of what they're looking for that day. I'm looking for building the relationship with the customer, letting the customer know I care about them as a human being. I don't care about just their wallet. Okay.
Mhm.
So that's what I mean by listening and hearing and reacting.
Yeah, I almost always will never hire someone who did not have any questions for me in the interview.
Absolutely.
That's
Absolutely.
to me just somebody looking for a job. But I wanted to add one more thing too, if I could, about the onboarding. So one of the things I teach my GMs, I saw this years ago. I don't know if you guys have ever heard the story about the full balloon, right? When a new hire comes on board, they're a full balloon, they're excited, they're happy to be here. And then every little thing that happens from the moment they start until maybe they end up leaving, it might seep a little bit of air out of that balloon, and it just keeps seeping. So if we're not filling it back up, eventually the air is going to be all gone, and that's when they leave. We do the same thing with customers as well, from beginning to end at delivery time. Anything little that happens, that air is seeping out of the balloon until finally they end up leaving and they're no longer a Hudson's customer.
Another great analogy.
Let me ask the group, what's more important in that initial training? Teaching and teaching people to sell in your style for the company, or product training?
Ooh, that's a tough question. And let me back up just a hair. I think there's 4 areas where people need training. There's number 1, sales techniques. Number 2, product knowledge. Number 3, operational skills. And number 4 is customer service skills. And I've forever been asked, what's more important, sales techniques or product knowledge? And I will say, when a person first starts in an industry, product knowledge is by far number 1, because there's no sales technique that can save you if you don't have basic product knowledge. Well, except for one sales technique, and that would be turning it over to somebody else. But I think that, your Hudson's, Lisa was talking about a month-long process. I'd like to put them through a 6-day orientation and then a 90-day training program that covers all 4 of those things: sales techniques, product knowledge, operations, and customer service.
What we do at Hudson's, we have about 80 plus vendors that we have access to, and a lot of those vendors are just custom, not in our showroom. So we really have to be able to know what we have to offer, as well as how to enter it in the computer. Because when you're doing custom entering, it can be challenging. That's our most cumbersome part. So we do, during the actual month of training, focus more heavily on all of that. And we have 1 day of selling, actual selling processes. We do a 7 steps of selling. But then after that month, the training doesn't end. We really never stop training. We have 90 days. They're going to have their mentor on their hip with them. And then we do skills practices every single morning before we open the store, which is where the selling training comes in more heavily.
Yeah. And I would say that in terms of, Shannon, the difference or the importance between product knowledge and selling skills, at the end of the day, most consumers do not trust the process. They don't understand furniture. We've made it very complicated. We do a better job now with, I think, with the, everybody's websites, because they do a lot of their own research, consumers do, before they walk in a store. But at the end of the day, it's expensive. Nobody wants to make a mistake. And they just have to feel good about the purchase that they're making, because it makes them nervous, right? And so as bad as I would hate to say it, I think it's almost a 50-50 split between those two. I agree with Brad about the other two that are critically important as well. But at the end of the day, if I'm going to buy from you, I want to make sure that you know what you're talking about in terms of my investment. And furniture is an investment. So having that knowledge of the product to, calm them down, assuage their fears, make them feel good about what they're buying, and making sure you answer all of their questions. That comes through understanding the product that you're presenting to the consumer, and just making sure that they're comfortable with what they're hearing, and that investment at the end of the day.
Well, and I'll just add one more thing, and we're kind of going off on a tangent here, but the single most important question in sales that every salesperson needs to be taught right up front is asking the customer what's important to you in selecting a whatever it is, and sell based on the reasons the customers want to buy, not the reasons the salesperson wants to sell. And I can give you thousands of examples, and I'll just give you one. Shopping for a mattress in Box Springs recently for a spare bedroom that nobody ever sleeps in. The only thing this mattress in Box Springs is going to have to support would be a bedspread. And I walk into a store, a guy says, "Can I help you?" I says, "Yes, we're looking for a queen size mattress in Box Springs." And he immediately takes me to the Tempur-Pedics and the Sleep Numbers. I don't want to spend that kind of money on something that's only going to support a bedspread. Now, if it was for my wife and I, that would be a whole different story. But they didn't do any questioning or needs assessment or probing into what is important to me, and then sell based on that. And that's fundamental lesson number one when it comes to sales training, is sell based on the reasons the customers want to buy, not the reasons you want to sell. And if they say, "I don't know, I've never done this before," then it tells you they want your knowledge and your expertise. You want them to tell them what's important to them. So, just that's one tidbit of knowledge and information that I think that everybody should have. So
that's a great insight and great point to make, Brad. Lori, how much does culture, the company and team culture, play a role in attracting and retaining high performers?
Yeah, I think it's critically important. And you can kind of tell the vibe of how everyone works together within your first 30 minutes walking in a store. At least I can, it just mainly because I guess I've done it so many times. But, at the end of the day, we spend a lot of time at work, and we spend a lot of time in a furniture store if we're a salesperson. And so you got to feel good about the environment that you're in. You have to feel supported. I think a lot of times retailers don't necessarily take that into account about how they do team building, professional development of their team, continuing to sharpen those skills and sharpen the axe, and provide an environment where people genuinely love to come to work, right? And encourage the team. There's a lot of retailers that are, one of the reasons that they are so successful is they encourage the team to work together. And, when one salesperson is off, then whoever's on the floor, maybe you have a buddy system or something along those lines where you're never off at the same time if you can avoid it. And somebody that is there that can pick up a customer that was yours when you walk in. Those kinds of things help build loyalty to, the environment that you're working in. And we all know how hard it is to find people these days, and particularly in sales, and particularly in commission sales. That is super hard, because it concerns people who haven't done it before, that their income could be varied, right? It's not fixed. So making sure that you do activities, you do team building activities, stuff outside of work, to make everyone feel valued. I think at the end of the day, we do all want to feel successful in what we do, but we don't want to have to wake up and go, oh my gosh, I got to go to work again. I got to go work in there. You want to really enjoy the people that you work with. And those retailers that build that and really make it a focus of, making sure their team feels valued. It's amazing that the tenure that they have in their organizations, because kind of like replacing a floor slot at retail is very, very expensive with somebody else's product. Starting over with a new salesperson, if you were to lose somebody that was senior or maybe one of your best salespeople or even middle of the pack, that's expensive too. And so the culture of the organization is just it's just so important. It's critically important, and I don't know that we value it enough, especially now during more challenging times.
I would add to that as well. Here at Hudson's, it's extremely important for us because we are a faith-based company. And so during my interview process, I talk about that because I made the mistake of not doing that early on. And I actually hired someone who did not have faith. And they made it very obvious in the store and made other team members uncomfortable. So now I do make it a part of my communication. We also have what we call a file review every month, where we meet, like each GM as well as myself meets with our HR department and VP of sales and the owner. And we have a keep, watch, or upgrade system. And we have to list each employee in under us if they are a keep, a watch, or an upgrade. And if they are not living our core values, or if they're not fitting in our culture, they are always an upgrade, no matter how much volume they're producing. And I've worked for companies that's the opposite. And somebody said earlier, I think it was Brad, about one bad seed, right? And I've seen many, many top producers run new people off because of them not living the culture that we want here at Hudson's.
Yeah, and I agree. Culture is everything. And, I've worked with companies that have people waiting in line to come to work for them, hoping for an opening rather than scrambling just to find the next warm body that they can put on the sales floor. And it all starts with culture. And I've said to retail business owners forever, if you can surround yourself with people that want to get better as human beings and as professionals, you can't help but be successful. Because there are so many people that don't have that culture set up in their organizations.
That's a really great point. So you guys have mentioned the word accountability quite a bit. We talk a little bit about accountability, which is really, I think, the root of so many of the questions that came in through registrants. And I think sometimes a word that makes people feel a bit nervous and obviously extremely critical for performance. Lisa, can I start with you? How do you hold your team accountable in a way that feels supportive rather than punitive?
So I like to use what they call the sandwich method, right? Always praising at the beginning, talk about what needs to be fixed, and then praising again at the end. I also typically try to get them to get to that reality rather than me pointing it out to them by asking a lot of good questions. Because I find that just for me personally, if I come up with my own problem, rather than, my boss telling me what my problem is, I take it much easier and I'm more committed to fixing it. So I do that heavily. But what we do here at Hudson's as well is we do 2 evaluations every single month with every employee. And we monitor those heavily. The first of the month we do, let's talk about what we didn't do or what money we left on the table last month. And then the mid-month is about, okay, where are we at on our goals for this month, to try to make sure that they know expectations, because you can't really hold someone accountable if you've not made those expectations really clear. So in that beginning of the month, if they did underperform, there is documentation done during that same evaluation where they just say that they understand that they were underperforming for the month, because we have what we call minimum standards at 6 months in, if they're not hitting their minimum numbers that they need.
Well, let me add one thing there, that when it comes to coaching and training, is that I see this so often, that sales managers or GMs coach a result. You can't coach a result. You can only coach the actions that got the result. And for example, if we're talking about closing ratio, and let's just say the store averages 30%, somebody comes in at 22%, you can't just say to that person, you're 8% below the store's average, get it up. You need to close more sales. You need to do a better job, because that does nothing to help that person. But if you say, I listened in on your last couple of presentations, here's what we need to do to get your closing ratio up to at least store average. And we give them very specific things that they need to do, like what I just talked about. I didn't hear you ask the question, what's important to you in selecting a dining room set? That's coachable, that's trainable. So I would just encourage everyone, don't coach results, coach the actions that got the results. And the only way you're going to know what those actions are is you got to observe every now and then and see what your people are actually saying to your customers out on the sales floor, because sometimes it might just scare the bejesus out of you.
Yeah, and I think from a sales management perspective, when I work with sales managers, I really kind of help them focus on three things. The first one is, making sure that they're in terms of accountability, making sure that they're establishing realistic goals for their team. And I love to make sure that the team, each of the salespeople, are involved in helping to set those goals. So the goals are not assigned; they actually have an active role in the development and the final goals that they'll be held accountable for. Regular preset one-on-ones, man, I talk about this all the time with sales managers. We need to have consistent, scheduled, pre-scheduled one-on-ones. I don't think it depends on the store and the person. Certainly, it doesn't necessarily have to be weekly, but man, every other week. It doesn't have to be short. Keep them short, keep them focused, but have that dialogue going so there's an opportunity, as Brad was saying, to coach like that. And then I think the third piece is handle negative situations very quickly. Sometimes those things can blow up and they can blow into other people and everybody else gets involved and people get their feelings hurt and all kinds of things can happen. And it just creates such a negative energy. And nobody likes to have to jump in and handle a conflict, but man, you really need to do it, and you need to do it swiftly and put it past and get moving on. But that accountability thing, as long as I think the salesperson really just needs to feel like they're a part of it and not just being talked to, that they're actually being coached and encouraged. And then I think accountability becomes less scary.
Yeah, and I think that the single biggest reason that businesses fail or even salespeople fail is because they're managed based on something other than statistics. They're managed based on an opinion. An opinion is wrong. And you because your opinion isn't the same as their opinion. And if I say, Lisa, I think you could do a better job, what's she thinking? I'm doing the best I can. I'm working as hard as I can. Well, you have a bad attitude. Well, no, I don't. Yes, you do. No, I don't. Yes, you do. You can't coach those things. If you say, I didn't hear you ask 2 or 3 great add-on questions during that presentation, they can't argue with that. And that's why your add-on ratio is below the store's average. We need to work on that together. And that's what I mean by you gotta base all of your conversation based on objective measures, not subjective measures.
I'm so glad that you mentioned that. I don't know if you guys are familiar or if anyone's watching that's familiar with a man named Hernani Alves, but he was the chief operating officer at Sleep Train. He also wrote a book called Balanced Accountability. And what I love about the work that he's done is exactly what you've said, Brad. Everybody wants the ability to be and feel successful. And we have like part of the metrics that you're speaking to, that objective is this is what success looks like. And I think part of the sales manager journey, right, is recognizing and helping realize that accountability is not about enforcement. Accountability is about stewarding your employees' commitment to success. It's about loving them enough that in order for them to feel successful and hit their metrics, you're helping them on their journey, right? And so that's what his book really focuses on, is that if you don't hold a synonymous equation with accountability is love, and that is what love in the workplace looks like, is helping somebody stick to what they need to do in order to be and feel successful. It's about a relationship. And if there's a discomfort in accountability, maybe there's a personal discomfort in what your understanding of accountability is, where it is punitive and it is about documenting, because most of us learn from HR, which is all about red tape, right? And so I think he brings a good point.
Yeah.
If you haven't ever read the book, it's a good one.
Let me bring up one other thing that really changed my life. And I have a guy that's my mentor who's also a life coach and just an outstanding human being. But he said once, discipline isn't what you do to somebody. It's what you do for somebody. And after thinking about that for a long, long time, all these lights went off in my head. If my grandkids are doing something that I don't think they should be doing and I just ignore it, well, that's not showing them love and that I care about them. They need that discipline. They need the coaching. They need the training. They need the discipline and all those things. And, I just had a really deep conversation with one of my teenage grandsons. And I said to him, there's nothing in this life that you could do that would make me stop loving you. But there are lots and lots of things you could do that would make me disappointed in you. And he said to me, would you be sure and tell me when that happens? And I said, absolutely. And that goes back to discipline is what you do for somebody to help them to be successful.
But I think that even pairs with the question, are you selling them on the reasons they want to be successful, or are you not selling on the reasons you want them to be successful? So it kind of goes back to the selling point is when you're hiring, are you really determining why they want to be successful, or are you just seeing and pushing and wanting them to? Because people that want to be successful will do what they do.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's a good point.
And that brings up another point. I always ask the question in the first interview, what do you find attractive about coming to work for our company? And if they haven't done any research on your company, then they're one of those people that's just probably hopping from store to store to store to store trying to get a job. So I want to know if they've done any research and found out a little bit about us and our company and what we do and how we operate, because those people are much more likely to be successful.
Lori, I love the conversation that we're having about this feedback. So if I'm a manager, I'm sitting here, I'm listening to the webinar, I'm like, that all makes sense. But how can a manager deliver real-time feedback that actually sticks? Like, what do they do? What's the action step here?
Yeah, I mean, I think it comes back to what I said earlier about the importance of these one-on-ones. It has to be a very trusting relationship too, because I do think to give that kind of discipline, it's got to be able to be received in a way that is actionable and people feel like they're not under attack, for sure. And that all happens when you've developed a really good, trusting relationship. And that doesn't happen overnight. It takes time. I mean, you have to work with people and do life at work with these people and understand them, observe them, kind of shadow them and see what their performance is. But they have to feel like that you really genuinely care about their success. And their success obviously is your success. The sales managers, I will tell you, I believe they have probably the hardest job in a furniture store. There's just no question about it, because they're kind of the hub for everybody. They're the hub for ownership, merchandising, buying, the warehouse, product development. They're probably the liaison with the manufacturer sales representative. They got to keep the office happy. They got to keep the floor staffed. They're in so many different places that sometimes I've observed them lose the focus on what really is important, and that's the care and feeding of their team. Lori, I can't do these weekly or bi-weekly one-on-ones because I got to do this, and this. I'm like, I'm not saying that none of that is important, but the most important thing is to make sure your team is motivated and successful on the sales floor with every one of those very valuable opportunities that walk in the door. And I'm talking about customers. And they are your front line to getting that sale. And they have to feel like that they're valued. So for me, it is, I believe in those one-on-ones. I truly do. And that they need to be scheduled so that the salespeople are used to them. They know they're coming. And it's not just all discipline and statistics and whatever, but, celebrate some successes. Talk about some challenges. Why didn't this work? Let's brainstorm this a little bit. They don't have to be an hour. 15 minutes is about right. And it does allow you that opportunity for the accountability that everybody's a little afraid of. But the salespeople get used to that. And the most successful retail stores that I have had the opportunity to work with are the ones that value and put the time with the salespeople as the top of the list.
I couldn't agree more. And those valuable one-on-ones, I think they should be weekly. They should be scheduled. They should be documented, and they should be very positive and given lots of pats on the back and attaboys and attagirls and nice job, way to go. Here's the areas we need to work on this week. And I think you need to open up actually 2 other areas of communication. That is, every morning, I think you should have a morning huddle with your staff. Mm-hmm. And the morning huddle, you just talk about what's going on that day. What appointments do you have? What customers do you have coming in? I want to congratulate Lori. Man, she had a great sale yesterday with a ton of add-ons, and man, she filled up the whole truck, a delivery truck. And well done, Lori. Yay, everybody claps and carries on. And it's just that public recognition, because I think positive's got to be 10 to 1 over negative. And then the third area, communication. So it's morning huddles, one-on-ones, and weekly training sessions. And those training sessions integrate the 4 areas where people need training: sales techniques, product knowledge, operations, customer service.
Yeah. I think care and feeding of the sales manager is really important too. I mean, we spend a lot of time talking about the sales people because they are the front line. But again, I started by saying how difficult their job is. And I think it's so important that owners take good care of their sales managers. You know, it's true. And yet I don't know that that happens enough either, because
Well,
for them to be motivated, to make sure that the sales team is motivated, we got to take care of them too and give them their time. And I'll tell you, there's a lot of retailers that have selling sales managers. So they're actually competing with their sales team on the floor. And that is just that is a recipe for not the success that I think that you want. And I understand why a lot of retailers do that. You know, it's another way to kind of flatten out and help with that compensation piece. But when they're in direct competition with their sales team, that's a big problem. It just really is. And they have to balance, well, if I go ahead and sell this and I take this sale, I'll get the commission. But then how can I get my sales team to trust me when they see me as competitive to them? So we just really have to do a better job, in my opinion, from my observations, of taking good care of our sales managers.
well, I agree. And I think the sales management position is the most untrained position in all of retail. And because the managers, the sales manager too often is the best salesperson. And so we knight them and make them the sales manager, and we don't give them the training that they need in order to be successful sales managers. And we just hope that they get it by osmosis. So I couldn't agree more that that sales manager's position is so gosh darn important. We need to take care of those people. And the only thing I might say is it really depends on the size of the store, whether they should be a selling manager or not. I mean, if it's a small store and you got 3 salespeople, yeah, probably the manager should be one of those 3. If you've got a staff of 20, 25, 18, 15 salespeople, no, that sales manager position is is not a selling manager. They're a managing manager. So
I will say, actually, I'm on the opposite side of that, Lori. I think you mentioned that you've been in Hudson's before, and their model is that they have selling managers. But I will tell you that the culture is amazing. And as far
That's
as
great.
training, as far as training the sales managers, we have a 90 to 120 days training that they have to go through before they can become a sales manager. And the sales staff look forward to wanting to do that. We promote from within. So I'm constantly posting postings for applicants who are interested in moving up with the company. That's what we look for, because that's our future, right? But the sales managers are not allowed to take a sale if they are pulled in by a salesperson to get involved and help them close the deal, a TO, as we know. They would not be on that sale. They would just be the sales manager helping them close a deal. And so I think because of that, I think it's why it doesn't really affect us in a negative way. I've never had anybody complain about it.
I think the compensation that they have opportunity to have is so critically important. So that goes back to culture. You know, as you were saying, I think that's critically important. If they feel like in order to get a bigger check, they've got to be out on the floor selling, it's really hard, you know, to lead. And I would also say that a great salesperson does not usually make a great sales manager. Just because you can do it doesn't mean that you can lead it and teach it.
Right.
So really, you know, I've learned this from working for manufacturers, where we've promoted our best sales representative in the field to a sales leadership role. And I would tell you, more times than not, they were not successful. So you have to be really careful there too about who you put into those roles, to make sure they're wired in such a way that they want to teach and they want to coach and they want to help others, because sometimes it's just easier to get in there and do it yourself versus trying to coach somebody along and bring them along to be successful.
Yeah, I always say most often people are already doing the job before they're given the title of doing the
Right.
job. And so I look for salespeople
that.
who are showing that effort to stand out, if you will, and help others and wanting
Right.
to coach and teach, even though you're not in that role. And that's usually who I move into that role at some point.
Yeah, and I've set up a system of upward mobility within organizations so that people can promote themselves within the organization. Because I couldn't agree more, Lisa. The best person you could promote is somebody that's already in your company. And the upward mobility is, number one, you have a new hire, then you have a certified sales professional, then you have a mentor, then you have a team leader, then you have a sales manager, and there are certain accountability steps that they have to reach progressively along the way to get to the next level. And they are rewarded justly, so that there is some monetary reward for them to reach that next level. But the worst thing that could possibly happen is that you have a staff of 10 people and 8 of them are trained and ready to be sales managers and step into that role. So that's a great place to be.
I was just getting ready to say that's a good problem to have.
Understand at that point, right? That's funny. So this is a really interesting question. We talk about that sales manager. Lori, when you are working with sales managers, one of the things that Brad said, and I think that this is so true, is the most underserved or like the most untrained person in our industry is going to be that sales manager. So we've talked a lot about this from what you can do as an owner. But I'm guessing that at least half of the people sitting here are sales managers that are like scrambling to find training that they have never gotten, have no access to resources, and are probably sitting there saying, well, that's all great. That still doesn't help me right now because I don't have the support from below. Oh, I've got some hearts going up, so I know that this is hitting and resonating. If we could take off our owner consulting hats and speak to these people, these sales managers that are stuck in the middle and maybe aren't being supported with the tools, the resources, the time, the energy, the training, how can they help themselves? Because if they're here, they're trying, what are the actionable steps and tools we can give them today to go and help their teams?
Such a great question. So in addition to it being the most undertrained role, as Brad said, it's the most difficult role that I said in the company. So all of that is so important to make sure that they have the support that they need. And I have lost count, honestly, Shannon, of the number of sales managers that I have coached one-on-one that are frustrated with the role that they have. They don't feel like they're heard. They kind of feel like they're pulled and torn in one direction, trying to get time off. Any of that has been just so difficult. The heart's going up. It's so true. And it happens all the time. And I hear it all the time. And I would tell you that I've had to coach a few people into making the decision to leave their companies because of that. So it is a serious situation. So if you're an owner listening in on this, on our seminar here, it's just so critically important that you spend time with that person that's the most valuable person, I believe, on your team. And what I encourage sales managers to do when they bring that to me and they're frustrated and they really feel undervalued, underappreciated, all of those things, is to sit down and have a transparent conversation with the owner. And it's really hard because sometimes that can open up some difficult conversations and you don't want to risk losing your job, right? So it can make you very vulnerable. So we talk about coming up with 2 or 3 things that they want to bring up that they're particularly frustrated about. But I also coach them on the way to do that, right? So to have the appropriate conversations, respectful conversations, to be able to sandwich it, like Lisa said. I love working here. Here's the challenge that I have. And I know we can work this out together. And if you do it in that way versus coming into a big gripe session and, airing the grievances, for a Seinfeld analogy here, but, it'll be so much more successful that way. And then work with the owner to come up with ways to help. You can do a lot of things on your own, whether it's, some self-learning or some professional development, or HFA has a tremendous library of all kinds of information to help you be better at what you do and build a skill. But at the end of the day, the person you work for has got to support you. And they've got to want to do that with you, and they've got to value you. So the first thing for me is to jot down a few things that you feel like it are either concerning you or bothering you, or where you don't feel as valued. And then, rehearse it a little bit, have your conversation with the owner, and then find a really productive way forward. And I'd really encourage the owners to be very open to listening to that, because again, losing a sales manager is such, oh my gosh, what a hit that is to the company. And we just need to make sure that that we handle these situations as they come up. And then making sure that we're taking time just to sit down with them as an owner and saying, how you doing? How are you feeling? What's frustrating you? What can I help you with? And then when you ask that question and you get that feedback from your sales manager, do something with it. If they give you things, well, I could really use this, or I could really use, an opportunity. I would love to have one Saturday a month off, or whatever it is. Find a way forward to show that you value them, because it's been my experience that when you do that and they feel valued and listened to, man, the commitment that you get back from them comes back 2 and 3 times what you would have ever expected. But we gotta make sure we ask those questions and let them know that we care about them and want them to be successful.
I would love to
Yeah,
chime in as well.
I think that goes back to culture as well. And if you create a culture of knowledge and education, that helps everybody along the line. And, I'm just going to beat up the furniture owners here a little bit. But you go to High Point, you go to the Vegas market, HFA has their retail resource center there. They got great seminars. They got great speakers coming in, and 20, 25, 30 people show up for them. Why does that happen? Do we think we know everything? And, I just wrote an article that said you can't coach the uncoachable. And too many people are uncoachable. They think they know everything until somebody points out to them, hey, there may be a better direction. And that's where you got to create a culture of personal growth and development within your organization. And heck, I even have stores do book reports where everybody in the store has to read a book and then they do a report on it. And they just give a 15-minute dissertation on what they learned of that book, because you've got to create that kind of culture, because we're living in this entitlement society where people think they should get something for nothing. And it's just not true. It takes hard work. It takes dedication. And as we said earlier in this webinar, that if your people don't wake up every morning saying, oh, goody, I get to go to work at ABC Jewelry or ABC Furniture Store today, something's wrong. And maybe it starts at the top, maybe it's in the middle, maybe it's at the bottom. I don't know. But you got to look at the organization and create that type of culture and environment.
Yeah, and if I could just add to that as well, Shannon. So I feel pretty fortunate hearing you guys talk about what you're seeing out there in the field, because at Hudson's, as I mentioned, we do heavy training for sales managers before they can even become a sales manager. That 90 to 120 days, and that's kind of dependent on them and how much they do try to do their own. We give them a checklist of everything that they need to know how to talk about and to be able to complete. We do not hire permanent sales managers at Hudson's. They are GMs in waiting, is what they know. When they graduate, you could get a store tomorrow as a GM, or you might be a sales manager for 6 months. But then we have ongoing training after that as well, about every 4 to 6 weeks. We will do all the sales managers and MIT training for the East Coast and the West Coast stores. And then I also, once I'm in the stores, will book time, specific time for my sales manager to sit down at least twice a month together to kind of do those kinds of things. And then I also do what we call stay interviews. People do exit interviews when people leave the company. Why did you leave? We're doing stay interviews here where we find out, why are you here? What's frustrating you? What do you love? What would cause you possibly to leave? There's about 15 questions that I ask, and boy, have I found out a lot from that. I just started doing those this year heavily, and you get a lot of really good information, and it shows them that you care.
Yeah, and that should happen during the one-on-ones, as Lori was saying.
Absolutely. Yeah. I love that, Lisa. Good for Hudson's. That's awesome.
Yeah.
I think this industry would be so much better if more people took that approach. I think it's great.
So for the sales managers that are listening, we are sitting here and we see you and realize that you are not getting the training and management and resources that you deserve. Please recognize for yourselves, as Brad said earlier, that your intrinsic motivation is your ability to be and feel successful.
Yep.
And so taking Lori's advice, sit down with your manager or whoever's leading you and say, these are the things that I need to be and feel successful, and communicate your needs. see if you're heard and follow through with that. That's the self accountability that we've been talking about. The second thing I heard Brad say is you can't coach the uncoachable. So have your team read books and then also read the books. There are a million resources that are out there. Maybe we can do a quick just go around. Brad, Lori, Lisa, what are the top 2 or 3 sales or sales management books that you would recommend if you guys are a reader or podcast or something to that degree?
Well, that's a loaded question. I'd
Don't say the
read
world's
mine.
greatest salesperson.
But you know, there's lots of good books out there, and Think and Grow Rich. Um, the one that talks about the flywheel theory, I can't remember the name of it.
Is that
Good to Great. Good to
Great,
Great.
yeah.
That's
Oh,
it.
good,
Yeah.
great. Yes, I got it right here. It's one of my favorites.
Yeah.
I guess
That's
it's
a great
Gordon
book.
Yancey. I
Yeah.
would say for me, Shannon, I'm gonna take it answer your question a little differently. I don't know if y'all are familiar with Strength Finders, but I am a big proponent of putting companies and yourself personally through Strength Finders, because it really is a very easy, very inexpensive way to understand how you're wired. And when I go into a company to help a company, I put the team through it, I put salespeople through it. And it's amazing how many times when I do that, I find out the person that's leading sales is really not an influencer or wired to sell. And yet a company wonders why they're not as successful in sales as they could be. But I think it's all about reading and finding to make sure that you got the right people in the right seats, which is the theme of Good to Great, right?
Right.
On the bus. And Strength Finder is a phenomenal way to do that. And then the next step after you understand how you're wired is strengths-based leadership for sales managers, so they can understand how their own strengths can be utilized to make them better leaders. And to me, it's a great common sense book that you can read, understand more about what makes you tick, and then makes you better at what you do.
Yeah, we used to at Hudson's years ago. I'd even forgot that until Brad said that, where we did read books occasionally, and then we would have to report back on it. But the one that I just bought, actually just got delivered a couple of days ago, that was highly recommended to me, is The Ideal Team Player by Patrick. I think it's Lencioni is the way you pronounce that last name. Yeah. So I haven't started reading it yet, but I'm going to start it tonight, actually. So I'm excited about reading it. But I heard it was great.
Patrick Lencioni is such a great person. So, like, have you ever heard the book, The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team? This is one of my recommendations. Is everyone thinks that top of that pyramid, the way to get results is to push results and accountability. But the reality is it comes down to trust and the ability to have conflict, and then the ability to gain commitment, and then to be held accountable to get those results. And I think so often I see sales managers, or we all see sales managers, just try to push that, that top piece. But coming back again to Brad's point, are you selling for you, or are you selling for them? And so, if you're trying to get them to buy into your vision, then you have the wrong person on your bus. And 2 things that I've learned, and I've heard tons of feedback for, I think Grant Cardone has long been a resource. He's not the resource for the furniture industry. These are relational-based sales, and I have not heard many great things. And so the quick close, the hard close, it's an objective book, so those do exist. However, I have not received a ton of feedback that those are the right approach to the industry. But one of my favorite books for any salesperson or any sales leader is called Sales EQ by Jeb Blount. And he does an entire sales series, but it's the relationship that you're having with yourself as you're going through the sales process, and how to navigate the ups and the downs that come with the consistent failure of sales, and how to work around with people that come with the rejection and the sales and the stuff that's coming up as a human being. It's more the psychology of it.
Yeah, and I'll start a lot of controversy here, but I think if you have to proactively close the sale, it's an apology for a bad presentation.
Don't want to use the word close either.
I don't like it.
They like to buy, but they don't like to be closed. Yeah.
If you've done everything right, shouldn't the customer just say, "I'll take it"?
Yeah. I love that our industry is taking that approach right now. People can walk out with a receipt, and there's this omni-channel journey, and the customer doesn't feel that pressure. We've done the in-store part of the sale, and they do the transactional. You guys, this has been amazing. I understand now why Caprice has made this a 2-part series, although I'm thinking Caprice next year it's like a 17-part series. So I'll pull you on this. You guys have been absolutely amazing. I literally could talk about this all day. But just again, thank you guys so much for sharing your expertise. Again, remember that you have friends in the industry. You can contact Lisa and talk to her about what her experience has been. You could talk to Lori about her resource. You could talk to Brad about his training. Like, these people all provide support, resources, and ear. We are all here in this together. We're here as an industry. This is not about competition. This is about our industry being well represented. Rising tides raise all ships. Let's all work together to get a bigger percentage of the consumer's wallet and not leave a bad taste in the mouth for furniture. So thank you guys. Please don't forget to explore any other resources in some of our upcoming webinars for more strategies to drive your business forward. Next time we're doing this will be May 22nd, Thursday, May 22nd, where we're going to dive even deeper, and we're going to be talking about driving results with sales processes and planning. And so until then, panelists, thank you guys so much for attending. Attendees, please keep inspiring your teams and driving toward excellence. And again, thank you for trusting HFA to support your business's success. Take care.
Thank you, everybody. Appreciate it.
Take care.